Exclusive contracted novel by Feilu Novel Network. Hong Kong film. Rebirth of Anger, rising from prison, traveling through the world of Hong Kong comprehensive education in the 1980s, Wu Shaozu discovered that he had actually been imprisoned in Stanley Prison, where he was serving his sentence. Joe, when others travel through time, they are either wealthy or poor. Otherwise, there will be a special identity of an undercover ancient troublemaker who can still be a short mule. He was lucky enough to cross over and become a prisoner squatting in a bitter kiln, which is really off the mark. What's even more frustrating is that before he was imprisoned, he was originally a cop and a rising star in the police force, with an endless future ahead. Gangao, Bao Zhu, a Quan, and several other brothers were betrayed by Zhang Chongbang and imprisoned for 4 years for rescuing wealthy businessman Huo Zhaotang. At the beginning of the landslide, Wu Shaozu chose to turn the tables against the wind. Zhang Chongbang, even helping thieves doesn't help brothers. The so-called justice is not worth mentioning. Situ Jie, being a police officer is not that easy. The silver band's horn is suitable for you. Huo Zhaotang, for the sake of wealth, we cannot be unkind. Leave your property to me and help you accumulate some virtue. After Wu Shaozu was released from prison, there were grudges and grievances. Next, do business, make movies, go from being a small person to becoming Zhu Gu, then to becoming Wu Sheng, step by step dominate the world. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 001. Red Pillar Training Fury begins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 001, Red Pillar Training Fury begins. There are several confidants in life, and how many friendships can last forever? Today we bid farewell to each other, shaking hands in pairs. Friendship is always in our hearts. In the center of the playground in Stanley Prison, a man who looked similar to Phage sat cross-legged wearing sunglasses made of white paper, smiling and pulling his eru. Accompanied by the long sound of eru, people around also sang along. On the playground, some people are playing basketball, some are lying on the ground smoking and chatting, and some are playing leisure ball. If it weren't for this being Stanley, there would still be a hint of peaceful time. Hiss. A handsome young man dressed in a gray-blue prison uniform, propped up his upper body, looked around at the unfamiliar environment in front of him, and let out a moan. Take your mother in your mouth, how could I actually cross into prison? After seeing the situation in front of him, Wu Shaozu couldn't help but curse. He never expected that when he woke up, he not only traveled to the world of Hong Kong comprehensive education in the 1980s. And surprisingly, he came to Stanley Prison and became a street thug with the same name and surname, Wu Shaozu. Joe, when others travel through time, they are either wealthy or poor. Otherwise, there will be a special identity of an undercover ancient troublemaker who can still be a short mule. He was lucky enough to cross over and become a prisoner squatting in a bitter kiln, which is really off the mark. What's even more frustrating is that according to his original memory, Wu Shaozu learned that before his imprisonment, he was a police officer and a rising star in the police force, with an endless future ahead. In order to save the kidnapped chairman of Pan Asian Bank, Huo Zhaotang, Wu Shaozu and several other brothers mistakenly killed a young thug named Kola and were sentenced to 4 years in prison. Punk the street, just squat in the bitter kiln. Are you a special note? Should we start the game so tragically? Thinking of this, Wu Shaozu cursed softly again. Crouching in a bitter kiln is already difficult enough, and carrying the identity of a note is simply a hellish difficulty. What is Stanley? This is a highly fortified prison located at 99 Stanley East End Bay on Hong Kong Island. The detention inside is basically the place where Hong Kong Island has committed serious crimes and received long-term imprisonment, or has been sentenced to life imprisonment for serious offenders. Many of these criminals were sent in by Wu Shaozu. It can be imagined how tragic it was for Wu Shaozu and several other brothers to enter this prison and be imprisoned. Criminals inside Stanley, as long as they seize the opportunity, will beat and abuse them. Wu Shaozu and his brothers who had been together before their imprisonment spent 2.5 years in a cruel and inhumane prison with a ruthless force. The original Wu Shaozu also died due to the daily increase in internal injuries. That's why Wu Shaozu traveled here. Grasp the grass, isn't this the plot from the Anger case? After inheriting the memories in his mind, Wu Shaozu suddenly realized. Having a deep understanding of the plot of the original work, he understood that his brothers carried the burden of their superiors, their masters betrayed them, wealthy merchants retaliated and fell into the pit, and they were beaten in prison. After being released from prison, in order to seek revenge, the brothers could only act as thugs, mercenaries, helping others rob goods, and robbing banks. In the end, one by one, they embarked on a path of no return and died tragically in the street gunfight. Crazy thread, even if I squat in the bitter kiln, I used to be a bad guy. Going out to be a thug, a mercenary, a knife or a gun for someone is simply mindless. After clearing up his thoughts, Wu Yaozu couldn't help complaining about it. Killing doesn't necessarily require the use of a knife, and revenge doesn't necessarily have to result in mutual harm. It's not cost-effective to harm 1,000 enemies and self-harm 800. Where does porcelain have the reason to collide with tiles? Since he has already died once in later generations, even if this is the beginning of hell and he is imprisoned, this life should be cherished. Reviving life is still on Hong Kong Island in the 1980s. There are countless Hong Kong films, and TV shows integrated here, with opportunities and business opportunities everywhere. Whether it's real estate, Hang Seng Index, movies, or trade, these are all ways out. No matter which road is open, you can ride the flood, attract beautiful women, ride luxury cars, and live a carefree life. Why bother to be a mercenary, a thug, and rob a bank? To be a person, one must eat one's brain. Being a knife to others has no future. Even if one is a short mule, they will still be worshipped by Guan Eryi, not going to be Guan Eryi. Otherwise, earning money is not worth spending. We still need to pursue a more promising career. Wu Shaozu's gaze gradually became profound. He should not be a prisoner of forced labor, or a street thug, living a life of confusion. If you want to get along, you can get along with the strongest. If you want to get married, you can get married with the most beautiful, and if you want to get married, you can get married. In short, if you want to be a good person, you should be a good person, not a bad person. Wu Shaozu thought to himself in his heart. At this moment, a cold mechanical voice rang out in Wu Shaozu's mind. Ding, the random task system is being activated. Congratulations host, the random task system has been bound. The system emits an emotionless prompt sound. A must-have for travelers, the golden finger has been credited. Wu Shaozu's face immediately burst into a brilliant smile. There is no way out, in this dark and boundless Stanley Prison. If there could be a system, it would be like having divine assistance. He excitedly checked the system introduction. Originally, this random task system would randomly trigger tasks, and after completing the tasks, one could receive rewards for any item. Ding, we are distributing beginner gift packages to the host. Do you want to activate the beginner's gift package? A series of system sounds rang out again. Wu Shaozu's face was filled with joy. I made a lot of money now, but I didn't expect that after crossing over, not only will there be a system, but also a beginner gift package. Wu Shaozu drew an excited smile at the corner of his mouth and immediately shouted in his heart, open. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 system space and 1 marrow washing pill. The sound of the system fell, and Wu Shaozu only felt an additional space in his mind the size of a football field, with a gift box floating inside. According to the system introduction, time in this space is stationary. You can put external things into the system space or take things out of the system space. A space the size of a football field can hold a lot of things. In the future, some unseen things can all be stored in space. Wu Shaozu's mind sank and he entered this small space. He reached out and took down the gift box floating in the air. Upon opening it, he saw a mixed element black marrow washing pill placed inside. The wash marrow pill, just by its name, is a miraculous elixir. According to the system introduction, this thing can not only wash away the dross in the body, but also transform and bring the physical fitness to the limit of human beings. If he swallows the wash marrow pill and elevates his original police Nova's body in combat power to the limit of humanity, it will be a terrifying existence. Without hesitation, Wu Shaozu swallowed the wash marrow pill directly. The wash marrow pill melts upon entry, and a tingling sensation instantly spreads throughout the bones of the body. P.S. New book upload, data is very important. Try a new beginning and writing style. If you like it, flowers, reviews, and tips will be on the author's face. Chapter 002. Helping thieves but not helping brothers, still having face. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 002, Helping thieves but not brothers, still have the face to visit the prison. Wu Shaozu quickly felt a powerful energy flowing into his body, transforming himself, and enhancing his strength. This force continuously transmitted to his limbs and bones. As the faint steam was expelled, Wu Shaozu felt that his body had undergone tremendous changes, both inside and outside the body injuries, all recovering as before. The body also becomes light and powerful. Wu Shaozu tentatively clenched his fist. At the next moment, bursts of bone explosion echoed from above the hands, with a crackling sound surrounding the ears. With just this punch, you can easily defeat a scalper. I'm afraid even the boxing champion Ali at his peak doesn't have this level. Wu Shaozu was pleasantly surprised, and the system's products were indeed exquisite. I didn't expect the wash marrow pill to have such an effect, not only restoring his body, but also bringing his strength to the pinnacle of humanity. Just as Wu Shaozu was immersed in his own joy, a shout came from not far behind. 27149, someone is visiting the prison. 27149, a bit familiar. Wu Shaozu didn't react for a moment, and his eyes unconsciously glanced at the number on his chest. His expression suddenly froze, he didn't expect this to be his number in Stanley. What the hell are you staring at? Hurry up. The military prison guards in the rear immediately became impatient and shouted and urged with their hands on their hips. Wu Shaozu regained his senses and quickly apologized to the prison guards with a smile, quickly following him to the visiting room. Someone visiting the prison. Who is it? As Wu Shaozu walked through the passage, these two questions quickly came to mind and he was very curious. You should know that since being imprisoned for over 2 years, no one has come to visit the prison, not even a ghost. My group of people, as poor people, were sentenced and sent to Stanley for further education. In the eyes of outsiders, it is a shame for the police force to be safe, and those so-called brothers and friends who were afraid of being implicated are also afraid of it. How could anyone come to visit the prison? Wu Shaozu came to the visiting room with curiosity. At the entrance of the visitation room, the prison guard admonished Wu Shaozu, 27149, without the permission of the superior, you cannot bring anything back to the warehouse privately. A few minutes later, the prison guard finished speaking and opened the door. As soon as Wu Shaozu entered the visiting room, he saw an old acquaintance. The person who came to visit was a middle-aged man with short hair, dressed in a black suit, with a sturdy physique, his clothes propped up, and a pair of sunglasses pinned on his left pocket. Wu Shaozu never expected that the person who came to visit was actually Zhang Chongbang, a double-standard monster. 3 years ago, Wu Shaozu and his brothers were sued for accidentally killing Coca-Cola. During the court hearing, Zhang Chongbang, as a master, chose to confess on the spot and help the thief instead of his own brother. Ultimately, it became the last straw that crushed them, leading to their group being sentenced to prison. Wu Shaozu, who is well aware of the plot of the original work, doesn't have a good impression of him. Zhang Chongbang appears to be just, but in fact, he only knows what principles and the rule of law to tell his brothers, and must uphold justice and truth. In the original work, when Zhang Chongbang's wife was kidnapped, he immediately put aside the so-called principles and justice and fired at his own people. Ironically, when facing questioning from the Internal Investigation Department, a group of brothers from the police station even stepped forward to protect him. Since Zhang Chongbang had an accident, he began to talk about human relationships and exceptions, adhering to the belief that everyone is brothers and needs help. When Wu Shaozu and his group were in trouble, he began to become impartial and showed principles and bottom line. Typically, only state officials are allowed to set fire and civilians are not allowed to light lamps. Wu Shaozu didn't give him a good face for such a double-standard monster. He sat down on the stool coldly, without saying a word, looking at what he was going to fart. "Azu, how have you been lately?" Zhang Chongbang saw his hot face pressed against his cold buttocks, as he had anticipated, without showing any dissatisfaction. He quickly stood up and greeted him with a smile on his face. "What did Mr. Zhang ask? How have you been lately? Why don't you come in and give it a try?" Wu Shaozu's attitude was cold and his tone was plain and authentic. "Azu, you don't need to be so weird. I'm here today to tell you some good news. Abeo's matter has now been handled by the police and will be buried in Kowloon Cemetery Hill." Zhang Chongbang stopped talking and directly explained the purpose of the topic. Upon hearing the words, "Abiao," Wu Shaozu was immediately furious. He reached out and slammed the table with a loud bang, pointing at Zhang Chongbang and shouting sternly, "Zhang Chongbang, you're not qualified to mention Brother Biao's name as a horse rider. Abio is in the police force and is in the same group as Wu Shaozu. He is the oldest in the group and is known as Biao Gu. After the accidental killing incident, he was under pressure and could only kneel at the entrance of the police station. At that time, there was still a police shame sign hanging around my neck. This shame ultimately led to Abio's suicide by jumping off a building. The incident of Abio jumping off a building has been eagerly reported by relevant media, causing a great stir in society. Under public pressure, the police, under the guise of investigation, froze Abio's body for over 2 years in order to quell the incident. He. Wu Shaozu sneered. The body of his own brother was frozen for more than 2 years before being buried in the ground. Zhang Chongbang came to inform him at this moment, as if he was very capable. "For me, we are still brothers now, and there is no need to act like enemies when we meet. Abeo's matter has been resolved now, and his ability to bury him is at least a good thing, so I'm here to inform you. After all, we are brothers, you should know this news." Zhang Chongbang faced Wu Shaozu's angry scolding with a slightly awkward expression on his face, but he still insisted on speaking. After listening, Wu Shaozu sneered at the words, "brother," in Zhang Chongbang's mouth. "Zhang sir, if you really treat us as brothers, then you can go find the ghostly lawyers and judges outside, and ask them to reduce the sentences of our brothers who are still in prison. You have now become an inspector, and this is not an easy task. When the big guy is released from prison, that's the real brother." Wu Shaozu immediately showed a disdainful expression, without concealing it, his mouth curled up and he directly mocked. The current port roads are extremely chaotic, and the top management of the Ghost only knows how to get things done with money, leading to rampant corruption. So for matters like commutation, as long as you pay and find some connections, there is no way out. As long as Zhang Chongbang thinks, they have a full chance of being released early from prison. Upon hearing this, Zhang Chongbang did not hesitate and immediately refused. "I'm sorry, Azu, I can't meet your demands. You used to be a bad guy, you understand. We belong to the disciplinary force, and we need to be worthy of the police uniform we wear. I won't do what you said, no matter if it's possible or not, let alone knowingly violate the law. For Zhang Chongbang, right is right, wrong is wrong. The reason why he chose to work as a servant is to arrest those who violate the law and commit crimes. Anyone who violates the law must be punished, even their own brothers are not excluded. If he really followed Wu Shaozu's instructions, he wouldn't have chosen to retract his confession temporarily in court that year. Before the trial, he had originally chosen to help his brother. When facing a lawyer's questioning, he intended to claim that he was unaware of Coca-Cola's death. But in the end, Zhang Chongbang still stood on the side of justice and persisted in his inner thoughts, which led to the future. P.S. New book upload, daily 10,000-word updates as a foundation, data is very important. If you like it, flowers, reviews, and rewards will be on the author's face. Chapter 003. From now on, I will speak in Stanley. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 003, From now on, I will speak in Stanley. Wu Shaozu's face was full of disdain, almost speechless. When has it been? He is still standing and pretending. If it weren't for Zhang Chongbang's last-minute confession, they wouldn't have had no chance. Those who speak with righteousness now really think that they are a model of the police force and the embodiment of justice. Mr. Zhang, you are noble and law-abiding. In court, you would rather help the thief than your brother. At this moment, Wu Shaozu paused for a moment, tugged at his own clothes, and began to argue. Open your eyes wide and see what I'm wearing now, it's a prison uniform. What police uniform are you talking to me about? Back then, our two groups were responsible for the kidnapping case. If the tasks were to be swapped, what would happen to you now? Have you ever thought about it? Zhang Chongbang was momentarily stunned when asked, but he remained stubbornly stubborn as always. No matter what you say now, in my opinion, right is right, wrong is wrong, and it cannot be changed. I have nothing to talk to you about. I know about Brother Biao, and you don't have to come back in the future. That's all. After Wu Shaozu finished speaking, he immediately stood up and left, not wanting to waste his words anymore. At this point, the two have completely different philosophies and arguing is useless. Wu Shaozu had just taken a few steps on his side when he glanced at Zhang Chongbang and casually said, "Is the truth and justice you believe in your heart really right?" This seemingly ordinary question touched upon the depths of Zhang Chongbang's soul. But for him, from childhood to adulthood, and then to becoming a mediocre person, truth and justice have always been his inner beliefs and cannot be changed. Zhang Chongbang looked at Wu Shaozu's receding figure and murmured, "Of course truth and justice are right, it's you who are wrong." Wu Shaozu slowly walked back to the passage, but in a somewhat dark environment, his gaze towards the front became more determined. The current society on Hong Kong Island is not like that of later generations, where the so-called legal justice is like waste paper, and even wiping one's buttocks feels like it is a mess. Black and white are entirely determined by one's own strength. Whoever has a big fist and is hard enough is the truth and the white. Under the guidance of prison guards, Wu Shaozu returned to the playground. He had just taken 2 steps when 2 people eagerly got up from the bench and walked towards him. "Zhu Gu, just heard the servant say someone came to visit you." "Who is it?" "We've been in here for so long, no one has come to visit us at all. Today is the first time we've been here." The leader was very curious and asked first. He was of medium height, with curly hair and a handsome appearance. However, there was a long scar on the corner of his mouth, which was particularly prominent. It was Gangao. Upon hearing Ao's question, Wu Shaozu walked forward with a smile on his face. At the back of Ao, a muscular and slightly chubby person is Ao Quan, both of whom were brothers who were previously in the same group as him in the police force. The remaining 3 people, Hua, Bao Zhu, and Gongzi Chang, should be on the court at this time. They usually go to play basketball together during the break. Ao, Quan, you two must have never imagined that Zhang Chongbang came to visit. Wu Shaozu looked at the 2 curious people in front of him and said with a slightly sarcastic tone. "This guy is so stubborn that he still has the face to come and see you. Are you laughing at us? When our brother goes out, the first thing we do is kill him first. Gangao was originally curious about who would come to visit, but when he heard the 3 words Zhang Chongbang, his eyes suddenly became gloomy, his face twisted, and the scars on the corners of his mouth appeared unusually terrifying. He said fiercely. "That's right, if it weren't for him, how could we end up like this?" On the side, Quan also spoke with a face full of anger. "The incident of Zhang Chongbang street fighting will only be discussed after our brother's release from prison. He came today to inform us that the police have taken care of Brother Biao's matter and he will be buried on the cemetery hill." Wu Shaozu had anticipated the reaction of these 2 brothers and slowly spoke up to explain. When Gangao and Quan heard that it was about Biao Gu, their emotions slightly eased, but they still showed anger on their faces. Initially, they were in the police force as close as brothers, but 2 years ago, Brother Biao was forced to jump off a building and commit suicide. Although they are currently in prison, at least they are still alive, but Brother Biao is gone. After they leave, this account will eventually be settled. But now that Brother Biao has been buried, it's better than staying in the funeral home all the time, and it can be considered as a peaceful burial. Quan's expression slightly eased and he spoke up. "Humph. It's been over 2 years now, and Zhang Chongbang is only pretending to talk about the burial. It's useless, go out and continue to work on him." Gangao remained indignant and spoke fiercely on his side. "Just now in the visitation room, our Mr. Zhang was still talking to me about how bad guys should be able to live up to the police uniform, about disciplinary forces, and what justice is right or wrong." Wu Shaozu sneered. He. This street thug knows how to talk about these nonsense truths every day, it sounds grand." Gangao spoke directly with a sneer on his face and a disdainful tone. Quan's side was also speechless, with contempt in his eyes. Looking at the appearance of the 2 brothers in front of him, Wu Shaozu took a step forward, with his left hand resting on Gangao and his right hand gripping Quan's shoulder. His gaze was firm and he spoke forcefully. "In the future, these so-called truths and justice, as well as right and wrong, will be formulated by ourselves with our own hands. When the time comes, see who dares to babble in front of us and say these nonsense." Gangao listened to these words and turned his head to look at Wu Shaozu. Suddenly, he felt as if the Zhuge in front of him had changed. Although I can't say why, I just feel that his overall temperament has greatly improved, and when he speaks, he still has an aura that he didn't have before. The whole person looks more confident and full of hope. Quan is not as observant and meticulous as Gangao in his daily life, and he doesn't feel much change about Wu Shaozu. However, he agrees with these words very much. Zhu Gu is right. In the future, we will rely on our own hands to create a sky, and see who dares to beep. They have all gone through kidnapping cases, as well as the death of Biao Gu. Now they are in prison, and many things have long been figured out. This world is blatantly cruel. Only by being strong can one obtain the truth and justice they desire, otherwise it will be all a joke. Just as the 3 of them were still in high spirits, 2 shouts suddenly came from afar. "Not good, Zhu Gu, Ao Gu." Gongzi Chang, he was beaten into the medical room by the people in Datun. Bao Zhu and Hua hurriedly ran over, their faces all blue and purple, and their expressions were anxious as they spoke. There was also a commotion coming from behind the 2 of them, and several prison guards quickly ran up in the distance. P.S. New book upload, daily 10,000 word updates as a foundation, data is very important. If you like it, flowers, reviews, and rewards will be on the author's face. Chapter 004. Supervision Area Overlord Datun, starting from today. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What's going on? Wu Shaozu felt a bit frustrated and directly asked Hua. Because Bao Zhu is too impatient and hot-tempered, let him explain the reason, not sure how to add fuel and vinegar, but also unable to explain clearly. And Hua has already married, with a more stable personality and saves time. Just now, the three of us were playing basketball over there, and then the street thump from Datun came to pick a fight on purpose. The young master was so angry that he immediately took action. Now he has been severely injured and taken to the medical room. I and Bao Zhu wanted to help, but they had a lot of people, so it ended up like this. Hua hurriedly said, while also holding onto his abdomen. The explosive bead on the side also quickly nodded, covering his left face with his palm, indicating that both of them were injured quite badly. As soon as Wu Shaozu heard that it was Gongzi Chang, his head began to grow slightly larger. You should know that Gongzi Chang himself doesn't have much ability, but his ability to cause trouble is not small. In the original work, the accidental killing of Coca-Cola was ultimately caused by the young master's strong and cheap mouth. During the subsequent mission, Gongzi Chang, due to his own selfish desires, removed a famous watch from the hands of a drug dealer, exposing Gangao and his group, ultimately leading to the tragic death of the entire team on the streets. Wu Shaozu never expected that Gongzi Chang would be in Stanley now, with such an iron head. Knowing that Datun was not easy to deal with, he didn't hide and instead took action. Datun is now one of the three major gangs in prison. If the number gang is in Stanley, he is known for his cunning and ruthlessness, despite wearing glasses and a refined and vulgar appearance. It was Wu Shaozu and others who found evidence of his crime outside and personally arrested him. Datun already harbored resentment, and young Master Chang went to cause trouble. It's better now, the person was beaten into the medical room and implicated the brothers. Just as Wu Shaozu was lamenting about Gongzi Chang, the troublemaker, a systematic mechanical sound suddenly echoed in his mind. Ding! The system has released a task. Strike Datun and stand out for the young master. Completing the task will earn rewards. Do you accept the task? Wu Shaozu was momentarily stunned. He didn't expect this young master to provoke trouble and even made contact with him to launch his first mission. It seems that he is not completely useless, this opportunity is just right. The young master's strong provocation leads to trouble, but everyone is still brothers. He is now being beaten into the medical room, and as the eldest brother, he must stand up for his brother. Of course, the most important thing is leeway. Stanley Prison itself is a land of the jungle, following the law of the jungle. If you are strong enough and ruthless here, how dare they deliberately come to pick trouble on you? It's not that the old birthday star is eating arsenic, thinking his life is long. However, it's a good opportunity to take advantage of the incident where Gongzi Chang was beaten and use Datun as an example to kill chickens and warn monkeys. There is a way to strike with one punch, to avoid 100 punches. As long as it is completed, it can also have a deterrent effect on other forces in the prison, and it will depend on who dares to cause trouble in the future. To accomplish this, the first step is to have strong personal strength. Datun, as a spokesperson for the number gang, had many young men around him. Prior to this, it was because of the large number of people that he was able to constantly oppress Wu Shaozu and his group. But now these are no longer problems for Wu Shaozu. Before his imprisonment, he was a rising star in the police force and received the most professional training at the police academy. Now, with the help of the wash marrow pill, his physical strength has reached the limit of humanity. Wu Shaozu himself has a level of identity as a traveler and is very familiar with the rules of this world. His thinking was not limited by this era, and he knew better how to use the relevant characters in the original plot for his own benefit. This is the biggest difference between him and Gangao and others, and it is also where his confidence lies. Accept the task. Wu Shaozu silently recited in his heart, having absolute confidence in himself. His gaze swept over Gangao and others. They all had angry faces and fierce eyes, clearly unable to bear the actions of Datun for a long time. Are you brave enough to work in Datun later? Wu Shaozu didn't say much and spoke directly to everyone. As the words fell, it was evident that everyone was somewhat stunned, with a hesitant and struggling expression on their faces. Gangao, on the other hand, looked bold and spoke fiercely, if you're brave enough, Zhuge will listen to you. Before, we were bullied by them every day, and even when we slept at night, we had to remain vigilant at all times. I've had enough of this kind of life. Let's give it a try today. I don't want to be a shrinking turtle anymore. Hua, Quan, and Bao Zhu were also infected by Gangao's words at this time. Since everyone was imprisoned, there hasn't been a single peaceful day. It's better to just listen to Zhu Ji's advice and directly lead the street fighting in Datun, as he always swallows his anger. Zhuge, I'm brave enough to fuck him. Yes, it's a fight. Fuck him. At this moment, Ahua and the other three made up their minds together and quickly said. At this moment, a piercing alarm suddenly sounded over the playground. Following that was the urgent urging of the prison guards. Now that the ventilation is over, everyone quickly returns to the warehouse. Hurry up, don't dawdle here. The crowd on the playground glanced at each other, got up cursing, and then lazily walked towards the exit of the playground, heading towards their respective monitoring areas. Many people were still whispering along the way. The alarm has been raised again, and the 1-hour daily ventilation time has been reimbursed. In the flow of people returning to the prison area, there was a man with a Chinese face and glasses, and this person was Lu Jiao. He was just singing comfortably on the playground, but now he has to return to the monitoring room, which makes him somewhat dissatisfied. Someone must be causing trouble again. Zhong Tianjing, who had a face similar to that of a hair-brother, was accustomed to being authentic. I just saw Datun on the other side of the court, and I was going to get into trouble with the gang of young masters like Gongzi Chang. Do you think they did it? Lu Jiao continued to speak softly. Upon hearing that the matter was related to the prison bully Datun, Zhong Tianjing's face immediately changed. Stop speaking, can you provoke Datun? Hurry up and leave. I've told you so many times, don't meddle in your business. Lost. Wu Shaozu and his group returned to the number 3 prison area with the flow of people. At this moment, Datun also walked in from the door, only to see him wearing a pair of glasses, with a body full of horizontal flesh, his expression dragging like 2, 5, or 8,000, and walking with steps that 6 relatives do not recognize. Behind him were numerous young horses, each with their noses facing upwards and a haughty and imposing appearance. How's it going? Everyone, sir. I kindly sent the young master to the medical room just now, so he can lie down comfortably. Don't thank me. Datun saw that Wu Shaozu and others were once again enthusiastic, and he was very pleased. He spoke arrogantly, his words full of provocation. Most of the other people in the prison area saw this as if they hadn't seen it, so they quickly returned to their beds and didn't want to cause trouble. The remaining bold ones watched from the side, watching the excitement together, because many of them were gloating at Wu Shaozu and others for their previous status as lackeys. Datun, you're so arrogant. Are you suffering from senile dementia? Your memory is not good, so I don't need to remind you. Who caught you before, right? Wu Shaozu directly retorted on his side, looking at him like an idiot. So what? You were wearing hats before, Wei. Now. It's still the same in Stanley, locked up with the dwarf mules you didn't look up to back then. He, everyone is now wearing this prison uniform, squatting in the bitter kiln, Wu Sir. Datun was a little stunned when he saw that Wu Shaozu dared to talk back. He thought it was Wu Shaozu who was quick to speak. It seems that when I hit him before, I didn't hit him hard enough. I will find another opportunity later to let them understand whether it was their own hard fists or their mouths. P.S. 4th update, new book upload, kneeling for flowers, as well as review tickets and rewards. Chapter 005. Beating Datun, the head of the Education and Education Department is. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. At this moment, Wu Shaozu gave a glance to Gangao and others. Then, taking a step forward and pointing at Datun's clothes, he spoke. Although they all wear this outfit, it's still different. Did you forget? You're going to squat here until you die, but will be out in 2 years. Datun didn't expect Wu Shaozu to dare to be so arrogant, pointing his finger at him and mocking him for wanting to squat in prison until death. He immediately became furious. Losing your mother, you really can't distinguish who the big and small kings are, right? Datun raised his hand and threw it towards Wu Shaozu's face. Today, he will teach this dead thug a lesson. Unexpectedly, before his hand could fall, he was tightly grasped by Wu Shaozu's left hand like an iron clamp, completely unable to move. Immediately after, Wu Shaozu extended his right hand and grabbed Datun's neck, lifting him up with one hand. Wu Shaozu was already quite strong, and he took the wash marrow pill to deal with a big village. It's not easy. Datun had to struggle desperately, only to find it useless. This scene startled everyone around and they unconsciously swallowed their saliva. You should know that Datun was covered in flesh, weighing at least 100 pounds, and was easily lifted with one hand. Ba Zhu. Is this his mother still human? At this moment, everyone's eyes towards Wu Shaozu were filled with shock. This also includes Gangao and others. I didn't expect Zhuge to be so powerful now. No wonder he suddenly proposed to work in Datun. It turned out that he had already been secretly working hard and his strength had reached such a level. This also makes their hearts more firm and confident. Wu Shaozu walked straight into the toilet, carrying the big village like a chicken, ignoring the horses around him. When Gangao and Bao Zhu saw the situation, they immediately blocked the entrance of the toilet, and the 4 of them lined up one by one, each with a fierce expression. Zhuge is teaching Datun a lesson inside. They must guard this door today and block the group of horses outside. The horses in Datun regained their senses and rushed forward in a fierce moment. The 2 sides confronted each other directly at the entrance of the restroom, with a strong smell of gunpowder. How dare you catch my boss? Are you guys fighting the street for death? Datun's head horse, Xiong, directly hit Gangao's face with his hand and shouted angrily. It's not certain who died today. Gangao tilted his head and sneered. He spared no effort today and stayed with Zhuge for a tough time. Ahua, Quan, and Bao Zhu on the side also showed a fearless and life-to-death attitude. With just a few of you fighting on the street, you're trying to stop us from entering. It seems like we didn't hit you hard enough before. Kill them directly, rush in, and save the big shot. Xiong waved his hand and immediately wrestled with Gangao and others with his horse, causing chaos in the scene. Inside the toilet. With a bang. Datun was directly thrown to the ground by Wu Shaozu, leaving him dazed and unable to find the north. Lose your mother. You're a dead thug, wait for me. I'll take you to the medical room tonight to reunite with young Master Chang. Datun struggled to get up in a daze, feeling powerless to fight back, yet still shouting and cursing. Coming out to mess around, I'm on the brink of death, and I can't stop talking harshly. Pop. In response, only Wu Shaozu gave a resounding slap. Datun's mouth was directly crooked, and blood immediately flowed out of his mouth and nose. Along with the glasses, they were also thrown out and fell to the ground, with the lenses in a web-like shape. So what if you move? Wu Shaozu lifted his leg and kicked it hard. Bang! Datun was kicked upside down and sat down in the pit, covering his abdomen with both hands, curling up like a skinned shrimp. Wu Shaozu walked forward, waving his fists as the wind roared past, directly hitting the head of Datun. His fists hit the flesh like a raging storm. Datun was in a state of being beaten throughout the entire process. During the process of taking action, Wu Shaozu also spoke fiercely. This punch, I gave it back to you. This punch is for Ao. This punch is for Ahua. With each punch, a scream echoed through the toilet. At the entrance. At this moment, Gangao was pressing Xiong directly onto the ground and beating him to death. And Ahua, Quan, and Bao Zhu were also fighting desperately on the side. Anyway, They went all out and burst out all the grievances they had suffered before. Although the other party has an advantage in number, they are all a group of brainless dwarf mules. They are not foolish either, they prioritize less over more. Of course, they choose to focus on dealing with the little leaders of those horses and press them to death if they catch them. At the same time, he also showed a completely harmless posture. After all, those who were horizontal were afraid of being stunned, and those who were stunned were afraid of not being fatal. This can better deter the others and achieve the best effect. The horses in Datun were caught off guard by the beating for a while. These few people in front of me are blocking the door, like a copper wall and an iron wall, unable to penetrate at all. Moreover, Gangao and others were ruthless in their actions, causing a toothache among the horses around them. Just then, a sharp whistle sounded. Beep beep. Then quickly came the sound of footsteps, resounding and powerful. I saw rows of military prison guards holding shields and batons, with their heads and chests high, rushing in from the passage in a neat and orderly manner, with a grand momentum. At the same time, a series of door bolts were quickly opened, making a clanging sound, ringing one after another, surrounding the entire passage. Everyone, hold your head and squat down. All squat down. As the prison guards arrived, everyone hugged their heads and quickly squatted down, along with Hua and the others. Gangao approached but didn't stop. Taking the opportunity, he patched up a few feet on Cat Xiong's body, shaved his head, and looked disdainful. He didn't stop until the prison guard walked to the side. A few young men stood dumbfounded and were knocked to the ground by the baton on the spot. The chaotic scene was quickly brought under control. At this moment, a military prison guard, holding a baton in his right hand and continuously tapping his left palm, walked through the crowd of people holding his heads and strode into the restroom. I saw his military cap pressed low, revealing a pair of sinister eyes, his gaze quickly sweeping through the toilet. Finally, Datun, who was lying in the pit, said with a fierce expression. "What's going on?" Upon hearing his voice, Wu Shaozu knew he was the head of the Department of Education and Education, nicknamed the Killer Xiong of Guijianqiu. This person is usually cunning and ruthless, and enjoys using force to solve problems, but it is indeed the most effective way. Because he had been stabbed a few times by a short mule outside before, he had always harbored a grudge and treated prisoners cruelly. However, Wu Shaozu seemed to have not heard him and slowly stood up from the ground. He walked lightly towards the faucet, reached out and turned it away, washing his blood-stained hands. "Wu Shaozu, did you defeat Datun like this?" Assassin Xiong walked straight over and pointed his baton at Wu Shaozu's head, shouting loudly. Sir, don't wrongly accuse a good person." "Which I did you see that I did it?" "Be careful, I'll file a complaint against you for defamation." Wu Shaozu lowered his head and washed his hands, carefully rubbing them, refuting in a contemptuous tone. "Your hands are covered in blood, and you're telling me you didn't take action." The killer Xiong glared at him with a sinister gaze. Wu Shaozu stared at the assassin Xiong without hesitation for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, Sir, you're joking. It's Datun who said he has a toothache and insisted on crying and asking me to have his tooth extracted. What else are you saying? If I don't pull him out, he'll fuck me. Then I can only reluctantly take action." Killer Xiong didn't expect that Wu Shaozu would dare to be so arrogant and speak lies with his eyes open. His mouth was crooked with anger, and he said angrily, "Okay, if you want to have your teeth extracted, then what the hell are you using? What to use to pull it out? Of course it's done by hand. Can't you see me washing it?" Sir. You won't be blind like Datun, will you?" Wu Shaozu immediately smiled and opened his mouth with a playful expression. P.S. New book upload, daily 10,000 word updates as a foundation. If the number of flowers reaches 1,000, add one more chapter. If the number of reviews reaches 300, add one more chapter. Welcome to share your tips, flowers, and reviews. Chapter 006. Kick your lungs, hit the street. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. At this moment, the killer Xiong feels like his lungs are about to explode. He shouted sternly, "Wu Shaozu, what is your attitude? How dare you insult the chief? Do you want to break into the responsible room and enjoy a single life?" Wu Shaozu, who was washing his hands, immediately turned right, stood at attention for a moment, and threw his back, leaving the killer Xiong covered in water droplets. He held his head high and saluted, "Report, sir, I'm just telling a fact, let alone insulting the officer." "You." Killer Xiong wiped his face and showed a look of eating feces. This street thug was originally a scumbag in the police force, but now he dares to provoke and salute me. The angry assassin Xiong lifts his baton and threatens to hit me. Sir, I thought it through before I started. I'm wearing a prison uniform, it doesn't matter. At best, I'll squat for a few more years. You are the head of the Department of Education and Education. You wear green clothes and beat prisoners at will. Be careful not to let the Human Rights Commission come to you for tea. Wu Shaozu spoke lightly, still maintaining a respectful posture. He straightened his chest, lowered it high and raised it, with his nostrils facing the killer bear, looking confident and fearless. Upon hearing Wu Shaozu's words, the assassin Xiong quickly reacted and the baton stopped in mid-air. This street thug is right. Although he is very angry, he still cannot take action against him. Shit. Killer Xiong's veins were bulging on his face at this moment, staring at Wu Shaozu and slowly saying, "Okay, I'll go find someone to testify against you now." "You wait." After finishing speaking, the assassin turned around angrily, his military boots stomping on the floor with a thud. He strode towards Datun, which was still in the pit, and pulled him up, questioning loudly. "Datun, you say, who beat you up like this? As long as you tell the truth, I will definitely stand up to you." Although Datun has been beaten into a pig's head now, he has not really become a pig yet. Top your lungs, hit the street. If you come out to mess around, no matter what happens, you can't provoke the Emperor's anger. I can only do things in the world, otherwise how will I continue to do things in the future? Datun, you don't have to worry. As long as you prove that I am here in Stanley, no one dares to touch you. Assassin Xiong saw Datun thinking and quickly urged him again. After asking, he turned his head to look at Wu Shaozu with ill intentions. At this moment, Datun's gaze crossed over the assassin Xiong and turned to Wu Shaozu, gritting his teeth and his eyes almost bursting with fire. Wu Shaozu saw the fiery gaze of Datun and greeted him with a warm smile on his face. He quickly moved forward and walked to the edge of the pit. He slowly squatted down, wiped his wet hands onto Datun's clothes, and then asked with sincere and heartfelt eyes. "Datun, how are you? Are your teeth any better? I put in a lot of effort just now to help you extract your teeth. But looking at your expression now, it seems that you are not very satisfied. Then I can only continue to help you pull it out." Upon hearing these words, Datun's pupils suddenly shrank. Wu Shaozu swung a punch and hit directly, completely ignoring the assassin Xiong on the side. With a loud bang, Datun flew backwards and collided with the wall, then fell back into the pit. Then, with a thud, it sprayed out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Killer Xiong looked at the scene in front of him and was a bit dumbfounded. He stepped forward and roared angrily, "Wu Shaozu, what are you doing? You dare to act in front of me?" Wu Shaozu spread his hands and said, "You see, Datun's teeth are not very satisfactory. You want me to continue pulling them out, sir?" At this moment, the killer Xiong's head was already smoking with anger. He glared fiercely at Wu Shaozu and once again reached out to pull Datun out of the pit. "Datun, why are you hesitating now that you've been beaten like this? As long as it's proven, no one will know, just say it." At this point, Datun's posterior teeth had already been bitten apart. "Lose your mother. It's the first time I've seen such an arrogant person, the first time I've been insulted." At this point, all three of them understood what was going on, but Datun gritted his teeth and swallowed it in his stomach, unable to speak directly. After all, he still has to squat in Stanley for a lifetime. If he were to point fingers at Wu Shaozu and confess to the assassin Xiong, not to mention that the position of the person in charge of the number gang cannot be preserved, he might even lose his life. Datun mute ate Huanglian and couldn't express his bitterness. He looked unwilling and said, "I'm fine, no one hit me. I asked Wu Shaozu to help with tooth extraction." "Ah. Sir, you heard me." Wu Shaozu immediately reached out and pointed to Datun, shouting loudly. Assassin Xiong was very angry and threw Datun into the pit without anyone to prove it. Datun, who was a street thug, refused to identify him. How could he play? This kind of thing is not uncommon in Stanley. As long as Datun does not provide evidence, he will have no choice but to take Wu Shaozu. Assassin Xiong glared at Wu Shaozu and helplessly shouted at the door. "Someone, take Datun to the medical room to wrap my wound." After shouting, he walked towards Wu Shaozu and spoke word by word, "You still have to squat here for nearly 2 years. It's best not to let me get hold of you, otherwise I will definitely mess you up. Don't be too arrogant." "Yes, sir. I will definitely behave well and strive to be released from prison as soon as possible." Wu Shaozu saluted with a backhand and said loudly. Killer Xiong suppressed his anger and left in a fit of anger. 2 prison guards in military uniforms came in together with a pair of stretchers, and were startled and they saw the pig-like appearance of Datun. "I didn't expect to be beaten so badly, with blood all over my face and a lot of bleeding on the ground." Both of them turned their heads to look at Wu Shaozu, their eyes filled with fear and shock. They are well aware that since Wu Shaozu and Gangao were imprisoned, it has always been Datun who bullied Wu Shaozu and his group with their horses. The reason why the alarm was raised just now was also because Gongzi Chang was on the court and was shot into the medical room by Datun with people. "I didn't expect Wu Shaozu to be so tough today, beating up his village like this. This is the first time in over 2 years." Wu Shaozu's gaze met the 2 military prison guards, his expression indifferent, and he remained silent. The 2 prison guards couldn't help but feel a thump in their hearts. When they just came in, they all saw the expression of the boss, the killer Xiong, who was a foodie. Needless to say, he must have been eating his fill here. When a short mule fights, as long as it doesn't cause any harm, it's good to get used to it. He also thinks about others coming out to testify every day, and his typical mind is full of bubbles. Stanley is wearing this outfit, who wouldn't be sitting, eating, and waiting to die? What is serving the citizens of Hong Kong Island? It's just shouting slogans and promoting to the outside world. In the end, it's not just to make a living. Why work so hard with such a small monthly salary? At the thought of this, the 2 of them exchanged a glance and threw Datun onto the stretcher like a dead dog, then turned around and carried him away. As soon as the prison guard lifted them out, there were bursts of screams of surprise coming from the door. "I didn't expect Datun to be beaten up like this and carried to the medical room." Wu Shaozu walked out of the toilet at this moment. When everyone at the door saw him safe and sound, their eyes were first shocked, followed by fear. Zhuge. Zhuge. Gangao, Ahua and 4 others stood at the door, greeting each other. Just now, they first saw the assassin breathing out in anger, and then Datun was carried by the prison guards on a stretcher to the direction of the medical room. I knew that Zhuge had already taken care of Datun. Looking back to now, this was the first time they had beaten those people in Datun so badly. Although they are all somewhat injured now, they all understand in their hearts that their situation in prison will undergo earth-shattering changes after today. And all of this stems from Wu Shaozu. The 4 of them had a fundamental change in their gaze towards Wu Shaozu. After this incident, they have become extremely impressed and recognized Wu Shaozu as their elder brother. P.S. The 6th update of the new book. Do readers like to read it? Give some feedback. Flowers, tips, and reviews are all acceptable. Chapter 007. Assassin Xiong's Impotence and Fury. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ward 3. This room now houses over 100 prisoners, with beds divided into 2 rows, consisting of 4 rows, located on either side of the room, with a spacious and slightly long hallway in the middle. Wu Shaozu, Gangao, and others were walking in the hallway at this time, with their beds located in the upper right corner of the room, at the innermost point. That location, the farthest from the door, is very convenient for manipulating people. As long as there is a circle of horses outside, what is going on inside cannot be seen by the prison guards at the door. And it was here that Wu Shaozu, Gangao, and others spent more than 2 years of tormented prison time. Originally, their positions were not concentrated, but Datun rushed to the same corner to retaliate against them, making it easier for them to take action during normal times. However, this situation has undergone fundamental changes just now and will no longer exist in the future. Zhudge. 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 As Wu Shaozu and others walked in the hallway, many prisoners in front stepped back and quickly made way for an empty passage, quickly taking the initiative to say hello. At this moment, their faces were all filled with flattery, with deep fear in their eyes. They nodded and bent over. Compared to my previous attitude, there was a 720-degree change, and I even did 2 somersaults in the air. Because they all saw it just now. The person in charge of the number gang in Stanley, Datun, looked miserable when Wu Shaozu beat him in the restroom. He was covered in injuries and covered in blood, lying on a stretcher like a dead dog, and was carried to the medical room by the prison guards. Even the ground of the passage was left with a long bloodstain, which made one's heart tremble uncontrollably. In that seriously injured situation, he probably won't be able to get out of bed for 10 days and a half without lying down. Including his head horse, Cat Xiong, who was also severely beaten, they were sent to the medical room together. Most of the other gang members are also injured. They all hid in their own beds trembling, afraid of retaliation from Wu Shaozu and others. But these are not the most terrifying yet. What is the scariest thing? Even the assassin Xiong was suffocated this time. The expression on his face just now was as ugly as eating shit, it's hard to imagine. They are the head of the education department, and for them, they have the power of life and death in prison. Usually, dealing with prisoners is also cruel, otherwise there wouldn't be a title of ghosts and sorrows. Killer Xiong, such a ferocious person, couldn't do anything to Wu Shaozu just now. It's the first time I've seen someone so arrogant. It's terrifying to think about it. Life in prison is becoming increasingly difficult now. Hello. Zhenggu, do you want to exaggerate like this? At this moment, Lu Jiao and Zhong Tianjing were squeezed in the corner of the bed. Looking at what was happening in the hallway ahead, Lu Jiao helped his glasses with his hand and said somewhat puzzled. Nonsense, who is Datun? The overlord of the 3rd prison. Now. Being beaten into the medical room by Wu Shaozu, you just saw the ghostly look on the stretcher in Datun. It seems that in the future, the 3rd prison area, they have no choice. Zhong Tianjing on the side shrank his head and spoke in frustration. I didn't expect Wu Shaozu and his group to be so powerful now. Lu Jiao turned his head and said back. I'll throw you a high. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhong Tianjing raised his hand and slapped the back of Lu Jiao's head, whispering. In the future, it will be called Zhudge, no big or small. Do you have a bigger reputation than others? If not, just be honest with me. Don't blame me for not reminding you. If you speak like this, be careful that Zhudge will take you to the medical room. Here, the strong are the greatest, and only those who are honest can lead a stable life. Wu Shaozu saw so many prisoners nodding and bowing with flattery, his face expressionless, and he didn't feel anything in his heart. The group of street thugs in front of them had previously greeted Datun. But now that Datun was taken to the medical room by him, he naturally became him. The rules of this world are like this. If you are strong and reasonable, you will be beaten if you are weak. Feng Shui takes turns. Xiu Gangao's face was full of disdain, and he didn't even look directly at this group of thugs. And behind them, Hua, Quan, and Bao Zhu curled up their lips, with a hint of enjoyment in their disdainful eyes. Wu Shaozu and others returned to their respective beds, without saying much to each other. They were all men, and there were many things that needed to be said. On the lower bunk bed, Wu Shaozu crossed his hands and rested his head, his expression relaxed, his legs crossed, and his feet kept shaking. At this moment, a mechanical sound of the system came to his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, successfully beating Datun and standing out for the young master. Reward. Lawyer Zhang Zhirong's 100% loyalty. Do you want to receive rewards? I lost it, finally arrived. Wu Shaozu immediately sat up, his face extremely excited, and the curvature of his mouth was even more exaggerated. The system actually rewarded a lawyer. He is currently in prison. Isn't this just dozing off? The system will promptly send the pillow. As for Zhang Zhirong, he is quite familiar with this name. According to the memory in his mind, Zhang Zhirong is the corrupt lawyer used by Zhang Tao in the first installment of the movie, Police Story, series. Although it may be unjust, it also depends on who the lawyer is. If you are 100% loyal to yourself now, then you will become a good lawyer. They possess the most professional legal knowledge. In court, he is even more eloquent and skilled in sophistry, even black can be said to be white. In the movie, even more tricky questions were used, leaving Qin Jiaju speechless and unreasonable. Zhang Tao was directly released in court. Having a talented lawyer on Hong Kong Island is definitely a great confidence. Nowadays, Wu Shaozu and his group are in prison. It would allow him to operate from it and even lead to early release from prison. Receive rewards. Wu Shaozu answered excitedly. Congratulations to the host for receiving lawyer Zhang Zhirong's 100% loyalty. The reward character will arrive within 6 hours. The cold sound of the system echoed again, and Wu Shaozu couldn't conceal his joy. He didn't want to stay in prison for a minute. Office of the Chief of Education and Education Department. A burst of smashing and shouting came from the room, and the prison guards passing by the door didn't feel their footsteps quickening a bit. Wu Shaozu is so stubborn. Just a scumbag in the police force, how dare he be so arrogant? I really think I can't do anything about you, can I? With a loud bang, the assassin Xiong in the office desk, holding a baton in his hand, smashed it onto the table again, feeling helpless and furious. As if this table was Wu Shaozu, used to vent his anger. And the wooden tabletop is already pockmarked, obviously this is not the first time it has been smashed today. The ground was also littered with documents, a mess. There are 3 prison guards standing in front of the office desk. At this moment, they all lowered their heads, trembling and not daring to breathe, afraid of getting moldy. Then the 3 of them silently exchanged a glance. How many times have you been riding a horse? I don't know. Is it important? Not important. They can't remember how many times this is. Every time the assassin Xiong eats his food at the prisoner's place and returns to the office, he becomes powerless and furious, without exception. However, the time of this outburst is a bit long after the previous one. The 3 of them couldn't help but give Wu Shaozu a thumbs up in their hearts, while also silently mourning. Killer Xiong, this time, probably has another big move. P.S. Thank you for the reward from the big shot, and there are also flowers. This chapter is for the big shot to add more. Chapter 008. Crime Room, March Bed, Comfort and Comfort. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Suddenly, several prison guards heard a loud bang. Assassin Xiong threw his baton directly to the ground and sat down on the office chair. It seems that it's about time to vent. Assassin Xiong reached out and touched his pocket, then looked at the clean tabletop as if he was looking for something. Then he lowered his head and scanned the surroundings with his gaze. He bent down and picked up a pack of Marlboro cigarettes from a pile of garbage, along with a lighter. He took out a cigarette and lit it. With a loud bang. Throw the cigarette and lighter in your hand onto the table. Assassin Xiong took a deep breath and slowly exhaled a burst of smoke. As the smoke exhaled, his emotions gradually eased a lot. I absolutely can't just let it go this time. No one dares to make him so embarrassed. This is Stanley, a prison. As the chief of the Department of Education, he has the final say. Killer Xiong immediately came up with a solution. In the prison, the least scarce item is prohibited items, and a basket can be easily found. Prison guards have the right to search at any time. As long as prohibited items are found, they will be directly framed by Wu Shaozu. How can he still be arrogant? At that time, I will just let myself handle it as I please. Routine check later, don't miss any of them. Assassin Xiong suddenly lifted his head, his eyes flashing with a shred, and looked at the 3 prison guards ahead, speaking fiercely. Yes, sir. 3 prison guards stood at attention for a moment and spoke in unison. Step by step. Outside the gate of the number 3 monitoring area, there were bursts of footsteps, neat and orderly, scattered and orderly, moving forward rapidly. In no time, the 2 iron gates of the number 3 monitoring area were quickly opened, accompanied by a continuous sharp and piercing sound. Assassin Xiong held a baton and strode across the threshold, then stood up with his military uniform straight and his head and chest held high. His military cap was lowered by 2 points, and below it came a pair of sinister eyes, scanning the entire area with a fierce gaze. When scanning to the position of Wu Shaozu in the upper right corner, a hint of excitement appeared on the corner of his mouth. At the same time, prison guards constantly rushed into the prison area from both sides of him. Routine search. Everyone, stand on both sides immediately. Squat down with your head clasped in both hands. The shouting of prison guards immediately filled the entire prison area. The originally oppressive atmosphere has now become even more tense and uneasy. People who feel nervous are afraid of being harmed by prison guards who come aggressively. People who feel uneasy may have serious consequences because their beds are not clean. Routine search, what is being investigated? Everyone understands that the items being investigated are certainly prohibited items. And why was it suddenly searched? It must have been caused by being rushed into the medical room in Datun just now, but this is not the main reason. What is the main reason? The vast majority of people coincidentally cast their gaze towards the upper right corner. There is a group of losers there. A group of losers led by Wu Shaozu. This group of people just offended the assassin Xiong. Who are they targeting this time? Can everyone not understand? But at the same time, their hearts were very afraid, and they could only show an unhappy expression. Finally, he lazily walked forward and crouched down with his head in his embrace. At the moment Wu Shaozu heard the sound, 2 words popped out of his head. Planting bribes. Jokes, as someone familiar with the original work. Killer Xiong, who is known for his street fighting skills, clearly belongs to the category of vengeful individuals. I made him look so angry just now, I'm sure he won't easily give up. So he will retaliate, and retaliation is best not to be done overnight. Daily reports are the most satisfying. As the head of the Education and Education Department, how should Assassin Xiong retaliate? First search for prohibited items, then fall on your head. This routine is not new, but it has been tried and tested repeatedly. He. The system just rewarded a 100% loyal lawyer, and the killer Xiong was actively seeking death. As soon as Wu Shaozu thought about it, an inexplicable curve curved at the corner of his mouth, which was meaningful. Then, with Gangao and others, they got out of bed and walked forward, squatting down with their heads in their arms. In no time, all the prisoners were sparsely arranged in 2 rows. Then, from the beds on both sides, there were bursts of ping-pong sounds. The prison guards were holding batons and searching recklessly. Never let go of any place, corner, or object of all sizes. Photos, books, pillows, quilts, bed boards, bed frames, etc. The squatting crowd lowered their heads and secretly looked left and right, and slightly lifted themselves to communicate with each other with familiar eyes. From time to time, he would shake his head and nod in greeting. Wu Shaozu looked straight ahead with a relaxed expression. The people around him, such as Gangao, did not react much, but they all looked indifferent. Because not long ago, they were still targets of oppression. Where did they come from? Flipping around, I'm afraid of being a loser. Assassin Xiong stood at the forefront, his baton rhythmically tapping in his palm, pacing back and forth, patiently waiting for the result. Report, search completed. At this moment, a prison guard approached the killer Xiong, holding a tray in his hand. Killer Xiong looked at the items found on the plate and nodded slowly, feeling very happy. This operation has yielded fruitful results. Because those items are all prohibited items, some of which have deadly killing power. Cigarettes, matches, playing cards, colored posters, sharpened toothbrushes, sharpened bamboo, etc. Killer Xiong looked ahead at the crowd crouching with their heads clasped, and a slight sneer curved his lips. He walked forward, his leather military boots stepping on the floor, making a clattering sound that surrounded everyone's hearts. Following behind were 3 prison guards, who were just 3 people in the office and now showed a fierce look, pretending to be tiger-like. You, come out. At this moment, the assassin Xiong stopped and pointed at the person holding his head with a baton. He spoke and then continued forward. Hurry up and stand at the door. Hurry up. 3 prison guards, holding batons, immediately approached and fiercely urged. The person reluctantly stood up slowly, glanced at the 3 prison guards, stepped on his sandals, and walked towards the door with Wang Babu. During the journey, many people raised their heads and looked at them gloating, cursing inwardly, I deserve this death on the street. It's best to go to the crime room, lie on the marching bed, and enjoy it. A situation like this occurred several times in a row in the number 3 monitoring area at this time. Time slowly passes by. Now there is only one final act left, and the finale will be staged. Everyone involuntarily cast their gaze towards the innermost part of the room. You, come out. Assassin Xiong looked straight ahead with his eyes, but his baton pointed diagonally towards his lower right. Wu Shaozu, crouching with his head in his arms, calmly spoke up. Wu Shaozu below, with a hint of mockery on his face, passed away in an instant. Zhudge. Zhudge. Gangao and the other 4 quickly got up and spoke, without considering anything else, with anxious faces on their faces. The consequences of finding prohibited items in prison can be significant or even optional, depending entirely on the attitude of the head of the education department, the killer Xiong. This is a dead end on the street. There are no prohibited items on their beds, and now that Zhudge is still being called out, he must not have a good heart. Squat down with your head hugged. Do you all want to enter the crime room? Killer Xiong saw that Gangao and others dared to stand up and immediately waved his baton to scold. This group of street thugs is so arrogant, seeking death. The louder he cries now, the more painful it will be for Wu Shaozu later. P.S. Today's first update, thank you all for your flowers and tips. Continue with the 10,000 word update and give back to the big shots. Chapter 009. So direct, do you call this framing? You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, Wu Shaozu gave a reassuring look to Gangao and others, stood up directly, and walked towards the door without saying much. Gangao and others saw the situation and squatted down with their heads crossed again, saying nothing more. Although the 4 of them are all worried that the assassin Xiong will use his position as a department head to take personal revenge. But at the moment they received Wu Shaozu's gaze, they believed that he must have a corresponding solution. Since sending Datun to the medical room, the four of them have gained a better understanding of Wu Shaozu's actions. I know he won't do anything uncertain, and this time it's definitely the same. The three prison guards behind the assassin Xiong looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. This one is not easy to provoke. The three of them dare not go directly to scold Wu Shaozu and stand at the door like they did to the previous prisoners. The routine search is over. Team up. The assassin stepped on his military boots and quickly turned around and left. The prison guards pressed down on the prisoners at the door and followed closely towards the direction of the office. The prisoners crouched down with their heads in their arms and quickly got up to discuss. Chenggu, have you seen it? Zhu Gu seems to have been taken away. Lu Jiayao supported the glasses that were about to fall off the bridge of his nose with his hand and looked at the door, saying. What's his name, Zuj? His name is Wu Shaozu. He thought he had taken control of Datun and the number 3 prison. He's the most powerful, and he's still handsome in just 3 seconds. Zhong Tian looks like an old fogey, with a thread in his mouth. Lu Jiayao looked bewildered and said, Zhenggu, didn't you make me call Wu Shaozu Zuj? Lost, crazy thread, you, one moment at a time, don't you understand? Wu Shaozu has offended the killer Xiong, so he can come back. He will be the only one in prison room 3. He is still Zhu. If he can't come back, he's just Zixazu. Zhong Tianjing casually replied and turned back to lie down on his own bed. If Zuj doesn't come back, who will decide in the 3rd prison area? Lu Jiayao was still confused. As a newcomer, he has some difficulty seeing the situation clearly. Zhenggu will give you a free prison survival rule. Don't care what you shouldn't care about, watch less what you shouldn't, otherwise you won't know how you died. It is possible for anyone in prison 3 to have the final say. In short, it can't be you or me. Don't stand in the line at random. Just be your cuteness. Lu Jiayao listened to Zhong Tianjing's words and felt lost in thought. If there is really one person in prison 3 who has the final say, he would rather be Wu Shaozu, at least better than Datun. Office of the Chief of Education and Education Department. Wu Shaozu stood at his desk, with 3 prison guards standing beside him. The few people who were caught together from the prison just now were just small shrimp accompanying them, and now they are all standing on the outside passage. With a loud bang, Assassin Xiong directly threw the tray containing prohibited items onto the table. The prohibited items in the plate were immediately shaken out, filling the table. He sat down on the office chair, lifted his legs, and casually scanned the table before stacking them together. The prohibited items on the table pressed directly under his feet. Because the ultimate goal of his routine search this time is not to look for such ghostly things as toothbrushes and cigarettes on the table. These things cannot be banned at all in Stanley. However, these things that he doesn't like can provide him with a good excuse. An excuse that can easily kill the street thug in front. Wu Shaozu's face was calm and composed, quietly watching the assassin Xiongju's pretense. In his eyes, the whole thing was a silly eagle, still flapping its wings vigorously. It won't be long before all the hair on his body is pulled out. Leave no trace behind. Killer Xiong now feels very good about himself, his strategy is average, and he is completely not in a hurry. He casually took a package of unopened prohibited cigarettes from the table. Surprisingly, it's a good pack of colorful cigarettes. This group of deadbeats are smoking at a higher level than his department head. After the assassin Xiong opened it, he took out one and clicked it. Did you see it? There are so many prohibited items. Assassin Xiong, smoking a cigarette in his mouth, looked at Wu Shaozu and pointed at the table, saying. I saw it, I saw both eyes. Wu Shaozu returned lightly, then his expression suddenly sank. However, these prohibited items are none of my business, sir. Wu Shaozu, these prohibited items were all found on your bed. Now that the evidence is conclusive, what else do you need to argue this time? Didn't you speak very well before? Assassin Xiong took a faint puff of smoke from his mouth and slowly exhaled, his face full of pride, and he looked like a small person achieving success. All. Should we be so direct in planting now? Wu Shaozu raised his eyebrows and looked at the smoking killer Xiong, speechless. It's just so direct, it's just framing you. What kind of thing? Now I say these prohibited items are yours, that's yours. According to prison regulations, the offender shall be sent to a responsible room. Assassin Xiong stood up, reached out to take off the cigarette from the corner of his mouth, pointed at Wu Shaozu, and spoke arrogantly. Then let's break the responsibility room. In a single room, I feel more at ease alone and don't have to squeeze in with those street thugs. Wu Shaozu shrugged his shoulders and looked indifferent. The system rewarded Zhang Zhirong for his loyalty, and he estimated that lawyer Zhang must be on his way now. Killer Xiong looked at Wu Shaozu in front of him and suddenly sneered. This street thug still dares to be so arrogant and seek death. There is no closed-circuit television in the crime room. Because it is a single room, there will be no witnesses. As long as Wu Shaozu enters the crime room, let him know what life is better than death. If you want someone to be more comfortable, I will fulfill you. A proud smile appeared on the killer Xiong's face as he slowly spoke to Wu Shaozu. Afterwards, his face changed and he instantly became extremely fierce. He reached out and pointed at Wu Shaozu, instructing the prison guard next to him, "You three, take him with you and go to the crime room with me." "Yes, sir." 3 prison guards immediately stood at attention and rested, answering in unison. Wu Shaozu was escorted by 3 prison guards and led by the killer Xiong to the crime room. The environment inside the room is cool, the floor is damp, and there are walls on all sides without windows. The incandescent lights on the wall were covered in dust, emitting a dim yellow light. Due to its old age, it still flickers and dims from time to time. The cold wind from the entrance passage blew around the room, emitting a whimpering sound, appearing somewhat eerie and terrifying. The layout of the room is divided into 2 rows, one row with 10 rooms, totaling 20. Each single room is cramped and cramped. The prisoners who were imprisoned in the crime room had to eat, drink, and sleep inside, which was not very comfortable. Assassin Xiong, holding a baton, arrived at the innermost room with Wu Shaozu and 3 prison guards. He turned his head to look at the prison guard beside him and said, "Open the door." A prison guard beside him quickly took out a string of keys from behind and opened the door lock. Squeak. Quickly reach out and pull open the iron door. Go in. Killer Xiong pointed to the single room and said coldly to Wu Shaozu. Wu Shaozu glanced at the assassin Xiong and didn't say much. He stepped on his sandals and strode forward without any fear. If Killer Xiong wants to play any tricks here, with his current strength, he can handle it in minutes. After Wu Shaozu entered the single room, the assassin Xiong also entered and turned around, directly closing the door. "Report, sir. The 3 of us have a stomachache from lunch and need to go to the restroom." A prison guard stood at attention for a moment and said seriously to the assassin Xiong. "No problem, I'll watch over here. Don't worry, take your time." Assassin Xiong nodded in satisfaction and waved his hand casually towards the outside. "Thank you, sir." After speaking, the 3 prison guards quickly turned around and left. Wu Shaozu almost burst out laughing when he heard it. These street thugs didn't even change their excuses, they always used the restroom. P.S. Today's second update, thank you all for your flowers and tips. Continue with the 10,000 word update and give back to the big shots. Chapter 010. Being able to beat up the officer in the crime room. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, the corner of the killer's mouth quickly outlined a hint of excitement. He slowly turned around, his baton rhythmically tapping in his palm. With that sinister gaze, he looked ahead at Wu Shaozu and spoke fiercely. Wu Shaozu, now there are only the two of us left in this criminal room. There is even no closed-circuit television here, calling it every day doesn't respond and the ground doesn't work. You're dead today. Wu Shaozu sneered and jokingly said. Sir, you're right. The conditions here are so good, it's very suitable for you to start, but it's the same for me. There aren't many opportunities to beat the chief in this crime room. Strike, sir. How dare this street thug be so arrogant? I really don't know the superiority of heaven and earth. After hitting a big village, I feel like I have a lot of abilities, and those who step on horses are afraid of their long lives. Upon hearing this, the assassin Xiong suddenly became angry and waved his baton, charging fiercely towards Wu Shaozu. Wu Shaozu showed no signs of fear on his side, and his physical strength had reached the limit of humanity, with absolute confidence. Watching the baton hit, Wu Shaozu only raised his hand to block it. The baton collided with his arm, causing only a slight tremor in his muscles and not causing any harm. However, the strength of the assassin Xiong is still much stronger than that of Datun. Upon seeing this, the assassin Xiong was somewhat incredulous. His own stick was forcefully resisted by the opponent's arm. You should know that the police baton is made of precision-rolled seamless steel pipes and wrapped with special rubber, known for its lightweight and powerful performance. Holding it in his hand, if an ordinary prisoner is hit by a stick, not only will it hurt their muscles and bones, but at least they will fall to the ground and howl in agony. This deadly street-fighting arm has such strong strength. He wants to see if the other person's head is equally hard, it's better to beat it into a paste. Assassin Xiong snorted coldly, clenched his baton, and used all his strength to sweep across Wu Shaozu's head. Wu Shaozu turned slightly and the baton of the assassin Xiong fell into the air. However, in an instant, he lifted his leg and kicked it out with a crisp and sharp motion. Bang! The assassin Xiong flew backwards and forcefully collided with the iron gate behind him. Before the whole person could fully react, there was a moment of darkness in front of them. Wu Shaozu picked up a pillow from the bed and draped it over the head of the killer Xiong. Then he punched the head of the male killer and smashed it down like a storm. This process is almost completed in an instant. Killer Xiong was completely unexpected and could only be in a passive state of being beaten. At this moment, there were only muffled sounds of blows in the room. And the assassin Xiong's limbs trembled and he danced like a crab. It's not that he doesn't want to resist, but that he finds his head pressed hard against the iron door, completely motionless. Even if I put in my own effort to breastfeed, I didn't shake it at all. Even breathing and shouting are problems, so we can only dance around aimlessly. In no time, the reaction of the killer male became weaker and weaker. Upon seeing the situation, Wu Shaozu stopped and took away the pillow. The assassin Xiong was about to die in the crime room, and he couldn't get rid of it. It was not yet time to take his life. The assassin Xiong suddenly opened his mouth wide, panting heavily, his chest rising one after another, and his face turning red from suffocation. Although the killer Xiong's head had just been violently beaten, there were no signs of being beaten on his face except for a bright red. The appearance is almost the same as before the attack. This is because there is a pillow in the middle, which prevents Wu Shaozu's fist from directly hitting the head of the killer Xiong, similar to fighting cows across the mountain. But Wu Shaozu's physical strength has reached the limit of humanity, and the vast majority of his strength will still be transmitted to the head of the killer male through the pillow. So his head must have been severely damaged. For this situation, even if we pursue it, there is no evidence to show that it was fought by Wu Shaozu. Killer Xiong gradually recovered and his breathing became much smoother. But the sharp pain emanating from his head still made him hiss and grin, and his gaze towards Wu Shaozu was even more fiery. Han family property, I'll compete with you today. Assassin Xiong lost his sanity and struggled again to pick up his baton and stab Wu Shaozu. Before he could finish speaking, Wu Shaozu slapped the baton with his left hand and pressed the pillow on the chest of the killer Xiong with his right hand. Just hit harder today. This street thug was not a good person originally, so he decided to cast a shadow over his heart. Then Wu Shaozu pounded fiercely with a thud, his momentum very fierce. The iron gate behind the assassin Xiong has already sunk outward. It's simply terrifying. Assassin Xiong felt intense pain coming from his chest, from the inside out, as if his internal organs were about to shatter. Mouth kept emitting screams of agony, heart-wrenching cries echoing throughout the entire crime room. Killer Xiong, he only has one question now. Mother Zhou Lei. Have those 3 street fights all happened yet? At the entrance of the crime room, 3 prison guards were chatting together, holding a lottery cigarette in their hands, burning brightly, with a pile of cigarette butts on the ground. You said Killer Xiong was a street thug, so you wouldn't have really killed him. Mind him, who let Wu Shaozu hang like this. Stanley wouldn't allow such a powerful prisoner. Where else should we put our faces? How can Killer Xiong, the head of the department, still get along? If there really is an accident, it will be the responsibility of the assassin Xiong, who will do us a favor. At this moment, screams of agony echoed from the accomplices' room. The 3 of them glanced at each other, all showing smiles at the same time, then smoking and talking nonsense. The fight was so miserable, it seems that Wu Shaozu has died this time. Killer Xiong has always been like this when he starts. As the screams grew louder, the 3 of them unconsciously turned around and looked towards the entrance of the passage. How do I feel that this voice is a bit familiar? One of the prison guards said with some confusion. Another person perked up their ears and said, it seems to be from the killer male. I lost it. Something happened. The 3 of them quickly threw away their colorful cigarettes and rushed towards the crime room where Wu Shaozu was located. P.S. Today's 3rd update, new book data is very important. I beg everyone's support.